Today, we'll be talking about what it's like to find our way through that first child leaving home to go to college. And here's a little proviso. If your kids chose or are choosing something other than college, just go ahead and substitute going to college for leaving home to live on their own, like getting a job or going into a trade, doing a gap year, or going into the military, just to name a few. Listeners, if you can relate, stay tuned.
Hey friends, it's Heather.
It's Hope.
And it's Heidi. And this is Finding Our Way Through. Okay, ladies. So I think most of our listeners know that the three of us each have 2 kids. And I know when my first was getting ready to leave for college, I had lots of mixed emotion. Just like
Oh,
I
boy.
did, when my youngest left. But I know you two both have sent one of your 2 kids off to college. And currently, Hope, I know you're in the process of getting your youngest ready to leave the nest this coming fall.
Yes. Boo-hoo. My tears
Empty
are
nester.
almost. Yeah,
Yeah.
I know.
In
I
the
can't believe
making.
it. Can't
And
believe it.
Heath, even though Hope can't believe her youngest is getting ready, I know you'll be doing the same thing next year.
You're
I
right
know.
behind me, Heather. Right behind
Brutal.
me.
It is. But guys,
Brutal and exciting, right?
because we're recording this in different locations, I wish I could actually send you a virtual tissue box or something. But
For our
Hope,
little
do you
tissues.
have a virtual tissue?
I've got my tissues right here.
yeah,
Right here, wipe my nose.
it's good. Okay. Because I can't send it through the cloud. Just imagine it's right next to you. Okay. Just like you did.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Heidi.
you, Hyde.
It will be helpful.
What
Patting
about a virtual hug?
your eyes. Oh, we can do
Ready?
that. We can
Aw,
actually do that.
Aw.
Oh, okay. Kiss, kiss, hug, hug.
Here's my heart.
Okay. Tiny heart.
Heather and her hearts.
So guys,
we'll provide some
Hyde first
context
did
for that
that
later on.
love the tiny hearts and love the virtual hugs. But anyway, we know as parents, right? Them leaving the home means we inevitably have to let go.
Yes. Very hard.
Yeah.
It does.
So I wanted to get your thoughts on this, all right? When you think about letting go, what comes to mind for the both of you?
That's
Have
such a good
maybe
question.
you want to start or Hope, whichever, it doesn't matter.
Heather, you want me to go first or you want to take this one?
I can take this one, Hope. So, I mean, again, Hyde, I would say that's a really good question because, gosh, when you think about letting go of someone or something, I guess 2 words come to mind for me. The first one, I guess, is release, right? It's sort of like giving up control
Yeah.
of someone or something, and I think the second word is sort of like surrender, right? And I guess it kind of goes hand in hand with release. But I just think after years of parenting your kids, when you let go, you're really surrendering to a higher power and trusting that what you've given them, is going to provide them with the tools to prosper as they move forward. I mean, that's what I would say.
Yeah. I'd imagine
Hopi,
that's what we all hope, right?
What about you, Hopi?
Gosh. So, I mean, I think that your word choice was great, Heath. I can completely relate to those words as well. I think when I think about letting go, a lot of different things kind of hit me. So like on one hand, what comes to mind is loss.
Yeah.
And like to provide some context, I think that's because, what I really believe is that I think letting go means loss to me because I think like we all, like the three of us collectively, experienced the death of our parents at a young age.
Yep.
So, we had to let go of dad as teenagers and mom as young adults. So in letting go, I was losing them. So I think I just naturally equate letting go to loss. And so, I think the same is true whether it's letting go of a person who may be leaving home for the first time, which is the reason for this podcast today.
Yeah.
Or if it's letting go of a relationship with a friend or a partner, or letting go of what could be so many other things. the letting go makes me feel like letting go itself means like, losing something or someone.
Yeah.
Um,
That was previously, or not previously, but someone who's important to you.
yeah, I mean, exactly. And so I think really because of my life experiences, the idea of letting go just conjures some sort of like sadness. And honestly, I think a feeling of nostalgia
Yeah.
Mhm.
for what I'm letting go of,
Mhm.
if that makes sense. Um, but on the other hand, I also believe that letting go can be freeing. And so let me just explain that. Um, because I think, freeing meaning just, ultimately letting go could be letting go of negative behaviors, negative emotions from past issues,
Sure.
or
Definitely.
letting go of a toxic relationship.
Mhm.
So I guess when I think of letting go, it's a mix of things for me. It makes me think about loss, but it also makes me think that letting go can also be empowering to some degree in that it can be healing, cleansing, or really freeing.
Yeah, necessary.
Necessary. Yeah. So I
Yep.
guess I would say it's just a mix. It's a lot. What about you, Hyde?
Yeah, so Heather said release and surrender. You
Mhm.
said loss,
Loss
but in a like in but both like sad and freeing. Um,
loss, yeah, from the perspective of, sad, but also like empowering in that it can be freeing for sure.
yeah. So my thoughts. Well, I think given the context of the situation, I mean, similar to what you said, Hope, letting go can be really hard and like emotionally painful is what I mean by that. I mean, again, if you're talking about the death of a loved one, or it can be a mix of really hard and really exciting, as
Mhm.
is the case with kids getting ready to leave for college. I mean, as parents, we're sad that the kids are leaving because if we've enjoyed a good, loving relationship with
Yeah.
them, we do feel that sting of loss, like you mentioned, of what's changing. And again, about what kind of adjustments and like adaptations we're going to have to make now
Yeah.
that that one part of the family isn't there anymore.
Mhm.
Yeah, and change
And
is a good word, Hyde.
yeah, because so much, I mean, things change,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and having to sort of move
It's the
through the
struggle with the
change.
transition.
Mhm.
Yeah. But like on the other side, there's so much excitement, right? Because, typically the kids are ready to leave at that
Mhm.
age and stage. And though they may feel anxious about entering what we would call like the strange new world, called the college campus,
Mhm.
they're also looking really forward, I think, to the social adventure and to the learning adventure of it. And then, too, I think as a parent, you're excited for them to have the opportunity to grow and learn and meet new people. Their world seems to get, you know, exponentially larger.
Mhm.
So what comes to mind for me, I guess, when I think about letting go in the context of children, like growing up and children leaving home, is that it is both hard and exciting.
Mhm.
Um, or, Hope, you said sad and, freeing or empowering. And so that's sort of what I think about.
Yeah. I mean, I think, yeah, I completely relate to that, especially
Yes.
in the context of a child leaving home for the first time.
Yeah. And so, Heather, your oldest is going into her senior year in
It's hard to
college.
believe. Hard to
Yeah,
believe.
it's really
Feels
hard to
just like
believe.
yesterday we
It's
were
kind of
moving.
flown by, right?
Yeah. I feel like I was just moving her into her freshman dorm.
Heather, I still have that picture of Farah and Henry upstairs that I think when they're both like 2 years old.
We have
I
that picture too. Yeah.
oh,
It's
I still have
crazy. I
that. I
know.
can't believe, it's no longer them at 2. It's
No.
them at 20 plus.
Yeah.
Almost 21. Yeah.
Yep.
And you stop and you say, how in the world has time gone so
Mhm.
fast?
It
But
is so
Exactly.
fleeting.
so your oldest, she's going into her senior year. Tell our listeners like what it's like, or what it was like, I guess, for you leading up to having to let go.
Yeah, I mean, again, another great question, and for me, I think it's really exactly what we all just said when you asked us about what sort of idea you conjure when you think about letting go. But for me, it was a huge mix of emotions, right? Because
Mhm.
at first, I got caught up in the euphoria of it all, if that makes sense. I mean, the process leading up to college decisions is quite long, as we all know.
Yeah.
Standardized test prep, completing applications and essays, etc., filling out financial aid forms.
Stressful for kids and for parents, right?
It is. It's stressful and busy. And,
Especially today.
And that all kind of culminates, or I should say all of that takes time, energy, and to your point, it's very stressful. So when Farah finally made her decision as to which college, she would like to attend, it was exciting, and we were all excited, and we were
Mhm.
very proud of her, right? So you go from euphoria to excitement. And then for me, really the reality of the decision set in, which was that she chose to attend a college in California, which is 3,000 miles away from where I live in Massachusetts. So
Yeah,
I then
across the country.
across the country, right?
Straight
And
across the country.
yeah,
Yeah.
6-hour flight.
Mhm.
If anything, is if there's an emergency. So anyway,
Talk about letting go
I
Yeah,
mean, right.
in real time.
in real time.
Yeah, it was really hard. So of course, everybody can relate to the fact that I started to get very anxious
Yes.
about the decision, because both of you know that she was a kid that, maybe had 2 sleepovers throughout her life up to that point.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Um, and in fact, we were so nervous that we sent a deposit to one of the local colleges that she had gotten into, just so
In
that we had a
case.
backup plan,
The
Yeah.
plan
if
B.
Yeah, the
needed.
plan B.
Um, and then, then I would say that anxiety turned to really kind of staying busy. And in hindsight, I think I
Focusing
had
on
to
something different, right?
Distracting yourself a little bit.
Yeah.
exactly 100% distracting myself. I kept busy, sort of with everything we needed to do to get her ready, so that I didn't really have to sit with my sadness or sit with my feelings. Um, so that is what it was like leading up to the letting go. How about you, Hide or Hope?
Well,
Yeah.
Hope, yeah, why don't you go? Because your oldest is about to end his sophomore year, right? And move into his
Yes.
junior year in
Yep.
college.
Correct.
So yeah, like what Heather's saying, like what was the letting go like for you?
Yeah, I mean, so leading up to Henry going away, Heather, I mean, I absolutely concur with what you said, right? Very
Mhm.
emotional. I mean, I when I think about it, I kind of laugh because I was totally dreading Henry leaving for school. I'm a pretty emotional person. My husband, Jim, would tell you and everyone else that he talks to that I cry at the drop of a hat. I know you both are, the same.
We
And
are
so,
criers.
yeah,
You're
This
we're
is
definitely,
good company. You're in good
which is why
company,
the
Hope.
virtual tissues are so important,
That's right.
That's
And the
right.
virtual hugs.
the
That's right.
virtual hugs, exactly.
And we need our sound machine for a crying
Yes.
sound.
So like I
Yeah.
think when I was thinking about, Henry leaving the nest, it was just like you said, super emotional for me. I've always been someone who has loved spending time with him and my daughter. And so like in the time leading up to him leaving, well, I couldn't stop time. I think at that point I really wanted to try my hardest to just stop time and hold on to him and like really hold on to the moment. The moment before I knew our family dynamic was going to change. Heidi, I think
Yeah.
you said that earlier,
Mhm.
right? And change meaning, I would be losing his physical presence on a daily basis. So what was that
Absolutely.
going to feel like, right?
Yeah, right.
And
Because
the
I
energy in the house.
Yeah, just the whole thing, right? Like you get so used to having your kids come in and out of the house on a kind of on a rotating basis. And so what was it going to feel like when he wasn't there physically? So it was all this stuff that was going on in my mind and I was just like, "Oh my gosh, it's going to be so strange, it's going to be so weird." But I think ultimately, having our kids be secure in who they are and knowing they can stand on their own 2 feet
Yeah.
is without us is I'd imagine what most parents want for their kids, whether they're leaving for school or college, whether they're leaving home for the first time, whether they're going into a trade of some sort, whether they're taking a gap year, whether they're trying to figure things out. I think it feels. I would imagine that it feels the same because we spend so much time caring for these people, these human beings and I think, when it comes time for us to let them go and to watch them walk away, you know, to say, see you later, see you soon. I just, the thought of
Yeah.
it just evoked like a lot of emotion.
Yeah, for sure.
And so like rationally in my mind, I knew that he'd be perfectly fine. But I realized that, what I was feeling leading up to him going away was more about me than it was about him,
Mhm.
meaning it was more
Yep.
about what I was losing
Losing,
versus he was gaining.
gaining.
Yeah, what he
Yeah,
was gaining.
Um,
absolutely.
and so I think like that's the thing that I struggled with a little bit. I kind of like finally figured it out. And I mean, it's really funny, right? Like having had Henry leave and having had him gone through that and having transitioned without him here daily, it's funny. Like I would think that with my daughter leaving in 4 months, I would be focusing on, what she's gaining. But I feel exactly the same way. I'm like, "Oh my gosh," like it's this feeling of nostalgia and wanting to hold on to time.
Yeah, yep. I mean, I know Heather and I can totally relate to what you just said, and plus too, Henry also chose to go to school in California,
That's
so,
right.
Yeah, I
He's
you
was
know,
gonna
3,000
say
miles
that.
away as well.
you and Hev
Yeah,
can, you know,
yeah,
kind of
and we've got a
bond
Southern
over.
California and a Northern California.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh gosh. And it's
But yeah,
funny
it's
too
just hard to
because I
let go.
think like what you said earlier, Hope, about the three of us having lost our parents at the age that we did, and sort of how hard loss can be, or the experience of loss, kind of what it conjures up. And so for us, I know we talk about how hard it is. I know for some parents, though, it's like they're rejoicing. They can't wait for, when they drop their kid off from school. So
That's
I
true.
guess to our listeners, you're probably going to hear
They're
very
throwing a
similar
party instead of
responses.
crying
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
and using
Right.
their virtual tissues, yes.
Some of the listeners are throwing parties. So
Popping the
anyway,
champagne,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, right. But
we
but
all
yeah,
experience it differently.
yeah, exactly. Um, so since you guys talked about what it was like leading up to letting go, I guess it's my turn. So it's funny because like if I'm being honest, when we started to think about the podcast and prepare for it, I started to try to remember what it did feel like because my oldest left in 2016 and my youngest left in 2018, and they both actually not only left for college, but they don't live near us anymore, and
Mhm.
so they've like left the nest
You've got
completely.
the double
Yep.
loss.
You've got the
Yes.
yeah.
So honestly, it's
You and
been
Todd are really on your own.
we we are,
You
but
really are.
and we'll talk about that in another podcast, sort of
Yeah.
empty nesting and making meaning at this stage in our lives. But
Yeah.
Yep.
um, it has been a minute since we had to say goodbye to our kids at college. But um, so and I know that both of you guys currently are finding yourselves in the middle of it, so that like feeling the feels
Yeah.
might be easier to access for you. I don't know, but I've been living a new normal with no kids at home for some time,
Yeah.
and that means them not even coming home for summer breaks like
Yeah.
yours still do. Mine,
I
like I
know,
said, are
hope we need to hold on as long as we can.
I know, but
mine.
mine doesn't really come home for summer break anymore, but
Oh, I
anyway.
know. It's
Yeah.
just it's
I know.
hard. But honestly, so if I had to summarize, I'd say I think I was living in this is what I'm saying, a kind of sweet denial. Subconsciously, I think I tried hard not to think about my oldest leaving until I had to, which sounds very similar to your stories. And for me, that looked like, doing all the practical things required to get your kids ready to leave, like Heather mentioned. But on an emotional level, I don't think I was really processing my emotion until after my oldest left, which I'll speak about in a minute when we move into, what it was like after you had to say goodbye. So
Yeah.
I'm going to actually just totally transition into that right now. And so, um, Hope, what was it like then after you said goodbye?
After
You
the
talk
dread,
about,
after
yes,
the dread,
you talk about the
When you
leading up to
actually
letting
had to
go.
say
when
goodbye.
I
Yes, when you
actually
had
had
to
to
say
say
goodbye.
goodbye,
Hmm.
yes. Well, it was emotional. It was very hard. There were lots of tears. But if I'm being honest, it was a little bit easier than I thought it would be in hindsight.
Okay.
But I want to just quickly explain. So as we just said, Henry is he's 3,000 miles away from where I live in Philadelphia. But he swims in college. He's a college swimmer, and so um, you know it was a big change for him to go that far away. It was a big change for us. But because of his swim training, he had to leave 2 weeks early. So 2 weeks before he was going to be able to check into his freshman dorm.
Mm,
And so we couldn't go with him, right? So I had to put him on an airplane. I took him to the Philadelphia airport. And that day that I actually said goodbye to him, or see you in a couple weeks, it was pouring rain, which perfectly mimicked how I was feeling inside
Yeah,
and
right, right.
outside.
Yeah, right.
Uh,
The black cloud outside feels like the black cloud
the
inside.
black cloud outside, was definitely the black cloud inside. So I took him to the airport. We checked his bags. I walked him to the security check. We hugged goodbye. And it's funny, I hugged him goodbye because he actually asked me if I could, maybe think about leaving so that he didn't have to watch me as he was going through the security check line, because he didn't want to be sad. So there were tears for sure when I hugged him.
Mhm,
And I tried not to, I tried not to lose it, like, right in front of him, because I didn't want him to be sad, or I didn't want him to be worried about how I was feeling,
mhm.
because he's a pretty sensitive kid. So we said goodbye. I went down the escalator. I left the airport. I got back in my car. I cried the entire way from the airport. It was still raining. I was literally bawling hysterically. Um, I got home, and the first thing I did, I went immediately into his room. I went into his bedroom. I think maybe because I was trying to feel like that connection hadn't
Yeah,
been just like broken.
right. Kind of the
um,
place, like, where his presence was.
his
He no
presence
longer is,
was,
but maybe just the
yeah,
association of that room. Yeah,
yeah.
Even just seeing all of his stuff,
Just seeing
made
all of
you
his
feel
stuff,
yeah.
yeah,
connected.
made me feel like, it's gonna be okay. So I was sobbing, and that happened, that occurred on and off for, the rest of that day. But I think focusing on something different in going into his room, for whatever reason, I started cleaning. I literally started cleaning his room, and
Your
cleaning
The
his
coping
room,
control.
the coping mechanism.
it was my coping mechanism. And then, that happened. I, like, went through, cleaned his room, still teary, but by the end of the day, I was like, okay, it's going to be okay. Um, and so that was that day. And then 2 weeks later, my husband and I went out and we helped him move into his dorm room. We were super lucky. His move into his dorm room happened over a couple of days, just because the timing of him starting school and him finishing his swim training gave him some extra time without his roommate there yet, which worked out well. And we got a chance to kind of see him in his new environment. We got to meet some of his teammates, and we really kind of got to experience his new life. Um, and what I saw was that he was super happy. He
Yeah.
Yeah.
was well adjusted, even
Mhm,
though he had been there for 2 weeks.
mhm.
And so when we left following his convocation, I hugged him. Jim hugged him. I had tears, but they were manageable tears. He had a few tears, but he was okay. And even though I was sad leaving, I knew he was going to be okay. But I think it was because I got to see him and see him in that environment for that short period of time that I knew it was going to be okay. So definitely emotional saying goodbye, but on the back end of it, having a chance to experience it, I felt like it's going to be okay. He's
Yeah.
going to be okay.
Had when you listened to, like, the first part of Hope's story, what it was like to say goodbye, like, the 2 weeks before they went out to California, actually, like, move him in and stuff, can't you just sort of, like, feel what Hope was feeling in that moment?
150%, you
Yeah,
know. Even when she talks about it now, you can just it, like, brings you right back to
It
that
does bring
moment,
you right back.
yeah,
you
yep.
know?
It's like
It's like,
having a
"Oh,
child, right?
like a rewind."
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
can picture
exactly.
standing in the airport with her,
Yeah, yeah,
Yep,
as a dark cloud of doom descends on her and she has tears streaming down her face.
yep, yep.
It's
So
hard.
the dark clouds of doom.
Yeah.
what about you, Heath? What was it like for you after you had to say goodbye?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the saying goodbye, um, really happened over a course of a few days, because we flew out to California early to spend some time together in Los Angeles. We went for some hikes and went to the beach, ate some great food at some great restaurants. And that was really just to ease both of us into the transition. Um, and I also wanted Farah to see that, Los Angeles has had a lot to offer. If she ever felt like she was sort of stuck or confined to campus, which I know sometimes a lot of kids feel. Um, and then, for me, then the actual goodbye was so hard. I was flying home on a red eye.
Yeah.
And so I said goodbye. So what happened was we had an early lunch, and then we went for a drive. And while we were sitting in the car, actually in Beverly Hills, um, Farrah looked over at me and said, "Mom, can you please bring me back to campus? Because the more time I spend with you, the harder this is going to be for me."
Yeah,
And
she was trying to exert her, ability to let go too.
absolutely. And she
Yeah.
she was trying to let go, and she was crying and I was crying. So, we hugged, and then basically both of us cried all the way back to
Yeah.
campus.
Mhm.
Um,
Mm.
but when she got out of the car, we hugged again, and then thankfully one of her new friends came outside, and she kind of grabbed Farah by the hand, and they walked away from me together. And it made me feel a little bit better. Hope, almost like you when you were talking about Henry and seeing him in his environment,
Mhm.
and he had been there for 2 weeks, but he had adjusted. I mean, Farah had slept at the dorm actually for 2 nights, and so she was effectively meeting some people early on. And I think
Transitioning.
having her friend grab her hand, it made me feel like, okay, she's got this, and it is going to be okay. And it was sort of like, all right, we can get through this if we take take sort of one day at a time. But it's really funny because when I got to the airport and got situated on my flight, um, obviously I was really sad, and I was wearing a college sweatshirt, with her college on it. And, like all new college parents do. Um, and the woman
Like
next
all
to
new.
me, basically took one look at me, and honest to God, she really didn't need to say anything. She looked at me and she just
She
said,
knew. She knew
she
you
did.
were the
She
new
totally
mom.
knew. She looked at me and she said, "Did you just say goodbye to your child at college?" I mean, I couldn't even speak. I just nodded. And I think I cried pretty much not the whole way home, but several hours into the flight, because I
Mhm.
think the reality, sort of that new reality, was setting in for me. And the loss felt really big. Um, so when I arrived home, Farah and I spoke later that afternoon, and she was actually upset. She was questioning the decision to be so far away from home. And obviously I was upset, but I really kind of talked her off the fences, and brought her back to really why she made the decision, and told her just to take one day at a time. And,
Mhm.
really that's what we both did. Um,
It's all any of us can ever do,
it's all
right?
any of
Yeah.
us can do, and, wouldn't you
Yep.
know it, like, speaking with her, day in, day out, each day got a little bit better, right? She was meeting kids, she was having fun, um, and then, like I said, each day got a little bit better for both of us, and I knew she was gonna be okay, and I knew I was gonna be okay, and that's really how it went. Now, Hyde, pulling out your memory from, 2016,
Yep.
what was the actual saying goodbye like for you?
Um, well, I guess for me, like both my kids, Sam and Helen, went to the University of Florida, so they were within driving distance,
Mhm.
2.5 hours. So that was a little bit of a help for me to know that they weren't too far away. And if they needed me, I could get to them pretty quickly outside of you guys
Absolutely.
having to jump on a plane, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, I think for me, that goodbye looked like dropping him off at his dorm room and, you know, setting it up and then taking him out for lunch before we came back to the dorm room to say goodbye. Um, some of his new suite mates were there, and so we had the opportunity to meet them and interact with them. But I think when we went back to say goodbye, like we were actually sort of getting ready to get in the car, that's when I think it really hit me. This reality of he isn't coming with us. Um, it just felt so surreal because, up to that point, whenever I had dropped him off, it was temporary, right? Like he was going to summer camp, he was going to a visit to his grandparents' house, a flight overseas, but I always knew that he was coming back to us.
Right, you knew the time frame.
Yes, for sure. And like the just the temporary nature of that time frame. And so like at that time, while I knew he'd be home for holidays and summer breaks, I did, I think, start to grieve the inevitability that one day his home is going to be the one he establishes on his own, apart from the one that we provided him, all of the time he was growing up. So I think grief kind of snuck up on me in that moment, but I did try to keep it together. And then, of course, you can ask my husband Todd about this one. I cried for quite a while on the car ride home. I'm not sure I cried the entire 2.5 hours, um,
Close to it.
but close. And then a few days later, I remember going into his room. I mean, similar to what Hope said when she dropped him off, but
To feel the connection.
couple, yeah, like a couple days later, I just went into his room and I remember sitting on the end of his bed and just crying my eyes out, just sobbing, sort of just sitting in his room and making space to sit with the feelings that I was feeling.
Exactly.
And ultimately, I had to feel what I was feeling so I could move through that process of grieving, of really, like we talk about, letting go. And also, too, I think because I had Helen still, my youngest, at home, um, it made that the God-shaped hole is what I talk about
Mhm.
inside me, inside all of us, much less empty. But then, when she left, of course, that's when I really felt the void. And interestingly enough, though Todd and I were both sad and again happy for this new adventure of theirs, we both seem to grieve in our own kind of separate ways,
Mhm.
sometimes together, but mostly alone. And I come across this quote by someone named Havelock Ellis. He was a physician and a writer, among other things, but he said, all the art of living lies in a fine mingling of letting go and holding on. So, like
Mhm.
in this case, I was holding on
I
to the
love that.
thousands of memories that made
Yeah.
that stage of life, of raising kids, such a meaningful one for me, while the letting go of what I could no longer hold on to. And of course, as you know, that's the kids, right? That's them.
Yep.
Um, they're meant to leave, and that's a good thing. But, uh, the letting go, just
It's really hard.
it's tough. It's tough. So that's what it was like, for me in terms of like the goodbye. But I want to kind of move, guys, segue to how you found your way through. So Hope, maybe I'll start with you. How did you find your way through this particular time period,
Well,
and what could you offer those in our listening community who are finding their way through this time as well?
yeah, I mean, and I'll start, and you guys can just jump in with anything that you might want to add. But I mean,
Sure.
how did I navigate my way through? I think I said a little bit earlier. I honestly, I think because he was super happy from the
Yeah,
start,
mhm,
it just made it so much easier for me to let go. Because I always like if my kids are happy, I'm happy. I'd imagine that that's how most parents feel at this stage. And I think we've talked about this. One of my favorite sayings is, "You're only ever as happy as your unhappiest child."
It's so
Which
true.
because it's the worry if one of your children is in a place where they're not super happy. You just worry about them.
sure.
Um, so because he was happy, I think, I didn't really have to work too hard at navigating my way through it. I was happy that he was happy. I think
Mhm,
if he were unhappy or if his transition was really hard, it would have been a lot more difficult. Again, because I would have been worried. So I think I was lucky too that he was joining a team of kids who were similar to him and that they had all shared the experience of swimming from childhood through high school and into college. And so I knew that when he was going to school, he sort of had already found his people,
yeah,
if that makes any sense. Because I think part of the
sure.
transition for a
Community.
lot of kids leaving is finding a new community. And
Yep.
so I think because he had sort of an immediate community, it made his transition easier, and it made my ability to navigate his transition, I think, a lot easier. So, I guess because he was happy from the start, and is now getting ready to finish his sophomore year in college, and he still remains super happy, it made it easier for me. Um, and I miss him, but because he's doing really well, I was able to let go. And I mean, and very honestly, you know, because of these devices that each of us has probably right beside us,
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
the ability to text, Snapchat, FaceTime, pick up the phone and call. I talked to him
Mhm.
a lot. I mean, I probably talked to him as much as I did when he was in the house. I mean, I really probably do talk to him every day. And so it doesn't really feel like a lot has changed, even though he isn't physically present 24/7.
It's just that
And
the locations are different.
yeah, and I think, I mean, do you want me to pause there and talk about like my advice, or do you want me to give folks that are going through it advice? What makes
Yeah, why don't you
sense?
go ahead and do that?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, so the only thing I would say is I think as parents, our journey is taking care of and guiding our kids so that one day they can stand on their own and
Mhm.
navigate their own path. And so I think when a child leaves for college, or, like I said before, takes a gap year, starts in a trade, just decides they're going to, just they're leaving home. It's a great step in that direction. And even though it's super hard as parents to let go, it's sort of the natural order of things. So what I'd say to any parent that's kind of getting ready to have their first child leave the nest, is that they're gonna find their people, they're gonna find their groove, they're gonna figure things out, and they're really truly gonna be okay. Whatever okay looks like for that individual child. And so as a result, you're gonna be okay. Text them, FaceTime them, Snapchat them, call them, but do so within reason, right? You don't want to be a helicopter parent. You want to give them, the wings to kind of fly on their own,
Yeah,
and have
definitely.
faith that they're going to figure things out on their own. I know I can say that to myself now, and I know that it's easier said than done, but it'll only help them. And like I said earlier, focus on what they're gaining and less on what you're losing.
Yeah, love that.
That
Thanks,
is
Hopi.
what I would say. Yes. What
Yep,
about what
love it.
about you guys?
Heath, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, Hope, I think that was so well said, really. And I think, for us, it's similar. I think, we were able to navigate through it. First with just really acceptance, right? Like just accepting the decision and accepting that, the house is really quiet and it can feel lonely at times, when Farah's not around. So we really try to accept and enjoy the moments when she is home with us because unlike Hyde, she's still home for holidays and summers.
Yep.
Um, and I think we've
Hallelujah.
navigated through it with support networks, with friends and family for us, and also being connected to her friends' parents who are all going through the same transition. And then for her, the power of her support networks are, again, her family, her friends, and her new friends at college, and her old friends from home, who are still really closely connected to one another because, as you pointed out, technology is amazing.
Yeah,
Um,
the
Thankfully.
connectivity.
I mean, truly,
yeah, and
thankfully.
then
Think about
and,
our
Hope,
lives when we were in college leaving our parents.
I just
Completely
incredibly
different
different.
world.
Let's do a can you give me a hallelujah for technology?
Hallelujah for technology. I mean, how many
Since
how many how
since
many
we
Hallelujah.
said
people,
hallelujah a
you
little
I
know,
saw
earlier.
you laugh, Heidi,
I know.
but how
when I
many
said,
people do you guys know that literally will tell you a story about being dropped off at college and it was literally like some of them actually flew across the country by themselves with no parents,
one of my
you know?
favorite one of my favorite stories is a dear friend of mine and Jim's, who went to school in the South, and his parents literally gave him bus money. He took a bus by
Oh, no.
himself with his bags to school.
Like you're on
Yeah.
your own. Yeah, again, you're on your own, kid.
You're on your
Like
own, kid.
You're on your own, kid, but I
You're
think that's
on your own,
actually,
kid.
you
I
know,
think a lot of people do that
In
actually.
that,
I
yeah.
think
I mean, yeah. In older generations, probably.
in older generations today,
Yeah.
it's become an experience like so many other things in life. Um, but I don't mean to digress, but I also wanted to say that, we've gotten through with just, sort of offering guidance and wisdom sort of whenever we can. So what I would say to that is, it took Farah a while to find her friend group. And, I would just tell her that despite how people look or act, right? Because a lot of them acted like they had it all figured out. But,
They don't.
yeah, but they
No
likely
one
don't. And
does.
yeah, I mean, it just takes time to find, your way and to find your people and to feel comfortable in a new environment.
Oh, 100%.
Um,
Yeah, a lot of time.
That's
yeah,
actually great advice, right? For parents too, right? Like the transition from home to college or home to not at home, is a really rough one.
it is a really rough one. And, I mean, I really did not, I mean, the first semester of college, it was just brutally difficult. And I think for me too, especially, we've talked about this on previous podcasts, but,
I'm
going to
fist pumping.
college,
I'm fist
but,
pumping
but
Heidi
going
because
to college and,
it wasn't
in
too
a,
it wasn't too hard because we were together.
I know yeah, see right there. And now I'm jealous, but, um, the fact that you guys had each other, and I was alone, so
Made it
that just
easier
added
for sure.
added added to the experience for me and why it was more difficult.
Yeah, the angst of
Um,
it. Mhm.
Yeah.
yeah, and so I think in terms of, what I would tell parents too, or what I've learned from the process is that, to both of your points, is that everything is going to be okay in your new normal, um, and that everybody experiences a transition differently. I try to remember that
That's a good point. True.
as much as I worried about her, um, that really, as hard as the transition was for us, it was actually as hard or harder for her.
Mhm.
Um, and it's, again, the transition is a major milestone for everybody. But again, you just have to accept the choice, and it's okay to have a huge mix of emotions. And it's also important to acknowledge how you're feeling and kind of sit with your emotions, right? Your anxiety, you're scared, etc. Um, and then I just think that preparing for the experience together and staying supportive of your child's decision, is what ultimately sets them up for success as they start their journey. And the last thing is too, is just again, to the point about technology and the importance of staying connected. I mean, for parents, plan your visits, right? M- Most every college has a parents' weekend, right? So you can
Yeah,
look
makes it
forward to
easier.
seeing your kids
Yep.
and, you know,
Gives you
plan
something to
trips
look
home
forward
for,
to.
yeah, and even for them too, plan trips home for holidays to give them something forward to looking forward to on the other end of it. So, um, and
You know
again,
what's so
we're
funny
all,
though about I don't mean to interrupt, Heather, but like
yeah, no worries.
if you really think about it, like children go away, right? They typically leave in August. They may come home for like a quick little fall break, Thanksgiving, and then you've got the winter
Oh,
holidays, right? And
exactly.
then there's like generally a vacation that's pretty extensive, and then they're back home in May. So like the times in between when all is said and done, it's
It's
really
not
not
that.
that bad.
No, right. And that's actually good advice.
Yeah, just to hold on to that, like,
Yeah,
you know,
hold on to those, those planned
The
visits,
chunks aren't too
really,
long.
um,
Yep.
and the holidays and the summers while you have them. Um,
live
and then,
for
of course,
those.
again, it's the being so fortunate to
Hallelujah.
FaceTime and video chat. I mean,
Hallelujah.
hallelujah. But I mean, Farah and I talk to each other probably 2 or 3 times a day,
So
every
you're
day.
Yeah.
able to, yeah,
Yeah, we
stay
stay
connected.
connected. I mean, again, it's different from when we were freshmen in high school, and if you wanted to call home, you had to wait in line in the dorm to use a payphone.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
people behind you were like, "You spend too
Freshman in
much time on the
college, right?
phone. Get off the phone. It's, your time is up."
It is
Yep.
so amazing how much things have changed over time
Yeah.
for sure.
It's amazing how
Yeah,
much technology has enabled parents to stay 100 times more connected to their kids.
Yeah.
absolutely. So, Hyde, that is what I would say. What advice do you have to offer the listening community?
Well, I'll talk about sort of finding my way through and then that, but and I guess what I'm about to say, what were you going to say?
I was
You
going
were
to
going to say
say,
something.
sounds like a
Hallelujah.
plan. No, I wasn't going to say.
Sounds like a
Well,
plan.
Hope's not going to
Hallelujah.
say it, so I'll say hallelujah.
Okay.
No, you
Okay.
said I'll talk about, how I navigated my way
Uh,
through. I was just going to say it sounds like a good plan.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
So,
you.
right. So what I'm about to say is going to make sense in a minute in terms of the question that we're answering. So, I remember being at church to celebrate high school graduates when both my kids finished their high school careers, and share with the congregation we were a part of a little bit about them and like what their future plans were.
Mhm.
But there was a particular passage of scripture I used when I was speaking, and it was Proverbs 31, which you guys may or may not be familiar with, but it's subtitled "The Wife of Noble Character."
Okay.
And honestly, like, if you read it, I mean, you're going to feel like it describes a superwoman. Because honestly, I feel tired when I think about the description of all she's doing for her family. She's described as industrious and provisional and entrepreneurial. But like in verse 25 of that proverb, it says, "This woman is clothed with strength and dignity and can laugh at the days to come." And so, why I referred to this, and I think why it hit me as hard as it did when I was sharing it, it was this. It was like when my kids were young, I wasn't thinking about the days to come because
Right.
I was so busy taking care of their needs on a day to day basis, which I'm sure you guys can completely relate to. But as those days stretched to years, the days to come ultimately would mean I would be having to let go,
Yeah.
Mhm.
which, again, it's that natural progression and what parents want for their kids. And so when I thought, to laugh at those days with like a huge question mark, I was like, is this woman nutty or something? Or the person describing her? Because I was like, what? Like laughing at days to come? I was like, I don't think so. It's more like crying my eyes out. I need some of the virtual tissue, I think.
How about virtual hug?
For
Virtual
Right here.
hug, virtual,
It's
the
right
virtual
little
here.
tiny heart.
hearts,
I know.
the tiny hearts.
But, for me, as I thought more about the way my husband and I tried to love our kids well and really tried to orient their hearts toward God, I thought, okay, this is what this passage might mean. Like God was saying, your strength and your dignity, Heidi, has been me. And because you've clothed yourself with me, and told your children about me and tried to help them develop a relationship with me that was all their own, you will be able to laugh at the days to come because like no
Mhm.
matter what comes their way, it's their faith that's going to anchor them.
And get
It's
them
their
through.
faith that's going to direct them and guide them. So like
Yeah.
whatever comes their way, they're going to be okay because I've got them. So instead of being afraid and worried,
Mm.
try to move toward this place where you find peace and joy. So, I think I found my way through this stage so much with the help of God first, obviously. And like I spent time with friends who got me and who got what I was going through. And that helped me to not feel so alone, because like we know, you guys, there are so many women, moms,
Yeah.
dads that have gone before us on this journey, and there are going to be so many
Absolutely.
that come behind us.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
so
So,
true.
like we prayed for them, we visited them when they were available because again,
Yeah. They
their
get busy.
schedules were busy.
Yep.
Um, we looked forward to the times that they'd be home for the summer, even though again, right, like they had their own schedules too. They were working.
Yeah.
Um, and so during college, when they would come, we tried to enjoy the time that we had together as a family. And I guess I started working more. That was one of the ways that I kind of found my way through. And
Different
even
focus.
particular since I've been,
Yeah.
empty nesting as
Putting
well.
all of your
So
energy into something else, right?
yeah, I just had more time on my hands. It was
Right.
time no longer devoted to raising my kids. So,
Right.
I think life it's all about transitions rather, and redefinings. Like, really, who am I now?
Yep.
Now that my oldest isn't at home anymore. So, I
That's a
mean,
great point
that's
right
some of the
there.
stuff I done, and some of the stuff that I think would be helpful to parents. But I do want to say too, though, like for us, it has been okay. Like our kids have been okay. They've assimilated, they found their people.
Yep.
And, depending on like where they go to school, especially at huge universities, there's so many different kinds of people,
Yep.
so many different kinds of kids, so many different kinds of interests. So, like,
Yep.
the hope is that your kids will find their people, but sometimes, your kids don't. And I would just say if there's situations where kids are not thriving or they're second guessing whether college is a good fit for them or not, I would encourage parents to like make a space to reconsider what, that might look like for them if they don't feel like they're going to be successful in college, and or if they have challenges come up, like bad things happen, like an assault on campus or
Mhm.
mental health crises. Like,
Absolutely.
my advice would just be try to figure out what resources are available for you on campus to help your kid work through that stuff.
Yep.
Get them the help they need. There are a lot of different resources that are accessible, in particular
And
if we're just
Heidi, I
talking
think
about.
schools would
Mhm.
probably provide those resources, right? Like it's probably pretty easy to find that
Oh,
through their
incredibly easy to
through their
find mental
schools.
health resources. Yep.
Yeah, the thing about a lot of college campuses though is that they aren't really well equipped to do like trauma counseling, and so they will meet with a student, but then they will refer out to a community mental health provider. So anyway, it's important to know, like, how to contact university health services if parents need to, things like that, just that they have the information that they need to be able to advocate for their kid if they need to, even though a lot of colleges these days obviously don't want parents involved because that's the stage in their life where kids are learning how to do things on their own. So, but
Yep.
anyway,
Right.
sometimes in special situations it requires a lot more involvement. That's
Involvement.
all I would say. Mhm.
Great advice, Heidi.
So anyway,
I
that's
I
all I
think
have
that's
to say.
excellent,
I
and I
want
would
to
just say,
say thank
just
you
to
to
the point that you made
both
about,
of
if
you guys
somebody goes
for.
to a college.
Go ahead, Hez.
Sorry, I was just gonna say that when somebody goes to a college and they make a choice and then, they're not finding their people and they determine that the experience, it might not be the right fit for them, just to parents that, it's okay because nothing is final. No decision is final. If the college is not the right college, they can go to another college. And for some kids, college isn't for some kids, and there are a lot
100%.
of, the world is big and there are a lot of opportunities and options for kids
Yeah,
as well.
especially today, right? I mean,
Yes. And
there's
so,
the
like you
world is
said,
big.
if that happens, and parents have these expectations, they need to readjust them, and really think about what's going to be best
Yep.
for the kid. So have a expand the umbrella, have an open mind. That's, one of the things that I'll say to parents a lot. But guys, I want to thank you both for sharing, you know, your own personal experience with such candor. I appreciate it. Hopefully our listeners will find it helpful. Before we get ready to kind of end, I guess the question would be, is there anything you'd like to add to what you already said? You told us how you found or are finding your way through the
Mm.
season in your lives. Is there anything in hindsight you wished you'd done or done differently that may be helpful to some people in our listening community as they find like their way again through the same season?
I mean, had I think the only thing I would have done differently would have been to focus more on what he was gaining versus what I was losing. Just really
Mm,
focusing on the great big world ahead of him, and not feeling like anything was going to change significantly in the relationship that we had together. And
okay.
there's one quote that I came
Mm,
across that I love that I just wanted to share. It says, "Finding your way to your journey may be wobbly at first, just as your first steps were a little shaky. But if you
mhm,
remember that my hand is always holding yours and that you're never alone, you'll find your strength and resilience just like you did when you were young." And all
mm.
that means is they're going to be okay.
Yeah, I love that. I love that quote. It's super precious.
What about you, Hyde? What would you say? Is there anything else you want to impart?
I mean, I don't know. I guess I would just say I'd send more care packages. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
Great point.
just the
Yeah.
small things that say, even though you aren't here, I'm thinking about you, and
Yeah.
maybe sending real cards, where you
And
actually
not
took the time to
e-cards.
like write a note inside the card via the real meal, even though it's, snail. Um, because like you guys talked about, I mean, hallelujah for technology, right? Like we can
Hallelujah.
access via via
Hallelujah.
we can
Amazon.com. They are
yep.
not a sponsor.
Yeah, I know. But if they wanna be, we
We would
can
love
still
them to be.
exactly. Even though
Amazon,
we
are
can
you
access
listening?
we can access the kids via phone, FaceTime, text, social media, etcetera. A nice card just says, "Thanks, thinking about you," and mail to their address so they can look forward to getting it, that just says, "I miss you."
And
Yeah,
even
so I think
today, I mean, that's such great advice even today. There are, you can just Google send a care package to your child, and there are like so many different services that can do that outside of, taking the time to create one your own.
Yeah, and even that takes time, that takes some thought, right? Like, "Oh, this is what I wanna do." So, if I don't have time to maybe, like, put it together myself, I can absolutely use one of those services that I can access pretty quickly, and hopefully it's fairly affordable. But yeah, I guess just continuing to build that internal core that you've been attempting to build as parents inside them since the time they were born, a kind of nurturance and love for them. So anyway, I wasn't so great at the care packages, but when they were in at camp, they would always get some good care packages and
I'm
some
gonna
great
heed your
cards.
advice in the next 2 years, and then in the next four for Mags. I'm gonna
Well,
send care
Hopefully it'll
packages.
help.
but what's funny about that, I mean, we just talked about technology and it's so easy to do. A lot of colleges now, just like they have services where they will come and pick up your laundry and do it for you, they actually have services, care package services. And, you can get on mailing lists and it will remind you of potential opportunities to send care packages. So keep that in mind. Maggie's College might have that.
I bet
So
they
you
Well,
could
do.
do it.
and I guess, that appeals to people who have all the money in the world, right? To be able to pay for their
Yeah, but I
kids to
mean,
get
it's
their
also,
laundry
I mean, it's a
done.
huge, huge variety of, of options for you too. You don't have to spend a ton of money to do it. And I think, Heidi, I loved your point about cards. I think if I think about, um, one thing I'll do in the future is send more handwritten cards. I love that notion. Just a quick little, I'm thinking about you.
What about you, Heath? Anything you would have done differently or
Yeah, I think it was just what I just said in
okay.
terms of sending more handwritten cards. I love that idea. Just dropping a quick little note because despite the fact that we talk a lot and technology enables FaceTime pretty much at any point of the day. Um, I think it's really nice to actually go pick up your mail and have something waiting for you.
Well, I'm glad that you both like that idea. Anything
Hallelujah.
else?
No, I really think you guys covered it, for sure. And I mean, I guess I would just say too that, what I've learned through the entire process is that life is incredibly short and that your time with your children under your roof is really fleeting.
Yeah.
So despite how busy our lives get, really try to appreciate the time that you get with your kids as they grow up, really, because it's a short period of time. And I remember
And it goes a
when the
lot
kids
faster than you could ever imagine.
do, but I remember when Farah was, I don't know, she was probably like 7 or 8 years old, and we saw an older couple, and they stopped to talk to us, and
Mm.
they said, "Enjoy every single minute you get with your children because before you know it, they're gonna be gone." And again, it goes back to the experience of you're like, "Okay, I'm sure." And then you get here and you're like, "That is just so true."
Yep.
The
It's so
virtual
incredibly
tissues
true.
come out now.
Yeah,
Virtual
but it's
tissues.
true,
Ready?
right?
Yep. Blowing my nose. Yeah,
I'm
but
drying
that's
my
true.
eyes.
Time is
That's a
short,
great
like
point, Nick. Yeah.
exclamation point, exclamation point,
Yeah.
exclamation point, right? But
Yeah.
okay.
Do I get
Um,
pride versus my
But
prize
hum
for having a
bum.
great point?
we will absolutely give you some prize. I
And
mean, pride. No, I don't have any prize. The virtual tissue box could have been one, but
I would like to say one other thing in that, for any of our listeners who are actually watching, their viewers, hope I was very proud. And Hadi, I'm going to say that Esperanza tiene un vaso de agua while you were speaking to our listening community.
bueno,
Can you translate?
Elena. That was Heather's Spanish name in high school.
Sí, y Isabel.
Para
Isabel,
hablar en
Elena, and
español
Esperanza.
con
Esperanza
su
SEO.
hermana for
Yes.
speaking
Sí.
Spanish to her sister.
For
Yes.
those who don't speak Spanish, I said, hope had a glass of water.
Yeah.
And that goes back to our self-care episode. Yes, episode on drinking water. And,
That Heather
and the
knows a lot about.
Spanish,
Heather, you
and
just reminded
again,
me of your research on water. That's good.
well, it's the research on water,
The
but also
importance of water.
professional. There are a lot of apps online to continue
Okay.
learning. I
Okay.
happen
Well,
to be using Duolingo right now to refresh my Spanish.
And
oh,
they
well,
are not a
thanks for
sponsor either.
that. Thank you so
Correct.
much for that. Now, as we know, unfortunately, this is a time where we come to the end of the podcast. And
Addie's ready.
Heath, yes, yes, you can hear her in the background. My dog is barking. Hopefully, Hope will edit that sound out. But Heath, until
Yes.
next time, dot, dot, dot.
Well, again, thanks again to the listening community for joining us today. Remember that you can find us at Finding Our Way Through on all of the podcast platforms. That's Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. Please hit subscribe to follow us, like us, and help spread the word about the community that we're trying to build. We hope that after listening to today's podcast, that you know that you're not alone in your effort to properly prepare your child to transition to college. This is Heather.
This is Heidi.
This is Hope.
And until next week, remember, you've got this.
You've got this.
You've got this.